So we're on page 5 in the booklet. And he's talking about the difference between the tzaddikim, where it says, Libam b'shusam, their heart is in their hands, versus the Rishayim, that it says their hands, but tzaddikim says their heart is in their hands, and by Rishayim it says the Rishayim are in the hands of their heart, which means that by tzaddikim they control their midas, they control their emotions, because moach shalit al lev, and by Rishayim the midas function independently. The moach doesn't have any effect on the lev, on the heart, and therefore it leads to destructive things, and also leads to the fact that the midos can't come together. And then he also explained how this is the source of this, the origin of this is from the higher world, from the world of Tahu. Then the world of Tahu, the midos was separate one from another. In the world of Tahu, that's where Shviras Calym occurred, the breaking of the vessels. And he explained how they're both connected. That because each midah was extremely intense, and one midah could not include the other and connect to the other, therefore there was a clash between them, and that caused the Shviras HaKelim. But now again, he's bringing it back down to us, to Nefesh HaBahamis. So we'll start with page 5. We'll start with page 5, 5 lines from the top, the line that begins with the word Shelohen. Zehu klolos hahepresh bein hamidas nefesh halakis lemidas nefesh habahamis. This is the difference between the midas, the emotional attributes of the godly soul, and the emotional attributes of the animal soul. So this is based on what it says in Tanya chapter 6, that Hashem created the animal soul in a way that it reflects and it's similar to the structure of the godly soul. The godly soul is made up of 10 faculties. The animal soul is made up of 10 faculties. The godly soul has 3 faculties which are intellectual, Chokhmah, Bina, and Das. And the animal soul also has the same 3 faculties, which is Chokhmah, Bina, and Das. The godly soul has the 7 emotional attributes, and the animal soul has 7 emotional attributes. And there are a lot of things that are connected to this. For example, during the 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuos, we know that these 7 weeks correspond to the 7 midos. When we count the Sphira, each week we spell out that this week corresponds to the attribute of Chesed. And then each day it's another detail. Chesed, Sheba Chesed, Gvura Sheba Chesed, Tiferet Sheba Chesed. And the next week is Gvura, and the 3rd week is Tiferes, which basically means these are the 7 emotional attributes, and we need to refine them, refine the attributes of the animal soul. And for this, we have the 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuos to refine the emotional attributes of the animal soul. Another example is when a man puts on tefillin, we wrap the tefillin around the arm 7 times, also for the same reason. The left hand represents the Nefesh HaBahamis, the animal soul. The right side is the godly soul, the left side is the animal soul. And being that the animal soul has 7 emotional attributes, we're binding the 7 emotional attributes to serve Hashem. Also, we had this before in the beginning of the Maimer, that the 7 nations that occupied Eretz Yisrael, and we went into the land to conquer the land and transform it into Holy Land. Before that, it belonged to the 7 nations. Kanani, Achiti, Ameri, Aprizi, Vayevushi. It's known as the land of the 7 nations. Again, why 7 nations? Because it also represents the 7 emotional attributes of the Nefesh Bahamas. So the nations of the world, they were not godly, and they had to be conquered, they had to be transformed. But being that all the emotional attributes are divided up into 7 categories, that's why we have 7 nations. Which means just like in the godly soul, there are emotional attributes, and the animal soul, the emotional attributes. But in the godly soul, they're directed towards Hashem. And in the animal soul, they're directed towards things that are inappropriate or not godly. But he goes into another detail about the difference between the two. The Zehu, so we're starting with the middle of line 5, that begins with the word Shalohen. The Zehu, Klalos HaHefresh, this is the general difference. Bein HaMidas, the Nefesh HaLekis, between the emotional attributes of the godly soul, the Midas, the Nefesh HaBahamas, and the emotional attributes of the animal soul. The Midas, the Nefesh HaLekis, thank you. The Midas of the godly soul, the Mshachos Min HaSeichel Davke. Midas of the godly soul come from, and they're based on Seichel, on logic, on intellect. That's what a human being is about. A human being is primarily an intellect, and his Midas are based on intellect. In other words, this is the right thing, this is positive, and therefore I want it. This is a negative thing, and therefore I reject it. And that's the reason why the Nefesh HaLekis is referred to as Adam. In other words, just like the other soul is called the animal soul, Nefesh HaBahamis, the godly soul is also referred to as Adam. Where do we find this? In the Pasuk, Adam Atem, in the Pasuk of Adam Atem, Sh'Adam Ikru HaMeichim. What is it that distinguishes an Adam from a Behemoth? The main thing is that an Adam has intellect, and an animal doesn't have intellect. As far as emotions, animals also have emotions. They have love, and they have anger, and they have emotions. But what makes the difference is the seichel. A human being has intellect, and animals are emotion. And the difference is that by a human being who's acting the way a human being is supposed to act, which is mainly if he goes according to his godly soul, kol inyanov hakel emapi aseichel davka. He functions according to Seichel. If it's the right thing, he's there. If it's the wrong thing, he stays away. But the Midas of the Nefesh Bahamas, Einon al pi Seichel. The Midas of the Nefesh Bahamas, the emotions are sort of independent of intellect and logic. They're just Midas, and they function as emotional attributes. It's not based on logic and on reason, on intellect and understanding. We can see this explicitly. Shamidas tivya is the natural emotional attributes, means those that come from the animal soul, not the godly soul. They come on their own. There's no thought about it. Not necessarily the person has to meditate. They're just drawn and attracted to all sorts of physical pleasures naturally. Or to hate something which is damaging, which is dangerous, because it's threatening to me. But the midah is just a midah that comes by itself. There's no need for any kind of intellectual process to sort of create that emotional attribute, emotion. Sometimes we see that even the Nefesh Bahamas, the animal soul, that gets emotional about something, there is logic to it, and it gives a reason to it. Or the poem Nira, sometimes it even appears, it appears as if that the midah, the emotion, came as a result of something logical. But be'emes, but in truth, the midas of the animal soul, ein ikris galusum and aseichel. Primarily, it comes on its own, just pure emotion. It's not based on logic. Where can we see this? Loraya. One of the places where we can see this clearly is Shari Hamida, he betekev gadol, when the animal soul gets emotional about something. Let's use anger as an example, like you mentioned before. When he gets emotional about something with anger or with hate, we see that the midah is harbe yesim and asechel. It's much more than what intellect warrants. In other words, there's a reason why I'm upset, but the upset is so much more than what the reason leads to. Unfortunately, you find sometimes someone does something to another person, they get angry, and the damage they do is way, way out of proportion of what the reason is that it should be angry. It was a very big tragedy here in the community many years ago. There was a member of the community that owned a parking lot in Manhattan. And in the parking lot, cars are coming from here, cars are coming from there. So he was directing the cars. The car came to a spot where he would be blocking all the traffic. So he was telling him to go the other way. And he didn't want to. So all that happened was that he told him not to go this way, but to go that way. He came out of the car with a metal bar and he murdered him. So we'd say that he did so much, he hurt him so badly that it warranted murder? No. So how does it make sense? He's angry for a reason. The answer is, it has nothing to do with the reason. This is pure midas. Nefesh Bahamis is emotion. And the emotions are sort of ready to explode, whether it's hate, whether it's anger, whether it's love in the wrong place, wherever it is. And it gets to, and it's not, because it's not based on emotion, and not based on logic, it'll reach a place where it's illogical. That's the Nefesh Bahamis. Kol Iker Nefesh Bahamis. So this is an indication that the emotion is primarily something that has a life of its own. It's not based on, it doesn't originate in the intellect. In fact, that's what the Nefesh Bahamis is all about. That's why it's defined as a Nefesh Bahamis. That's why it's called Nefesh Bahamis, because it's similar to the difference between a human being and an animal. Behemoth, just like an animal, shein la seichel, doesn't operate by intellect, by logic. Animals are midas. They're just emotion. And this goes back to the point he mentioned in the beginning of this ois, that Rishayim, the wicked people, the people that do wicked things and evil things in this world, and in general, the negative character traits of a Nefesh Bahamis is called Kalovim. Why Calym? Because Calym is made up of two words, Kulei Lev, it's all heart. Sheikra Hein Hamidus. And even though there's some logic to it, Gamkein, like imagine an animal, a dog, that someone bothered the dog and they'll attack him. So again, the dog's attack is like this story with this person. It's way out of proportion to what happened. And nevertheless, it's because an animal is not functioning apiseichel, animals functioning purely by emotion. Rishayim and the Nefesh Bahamis is the same thing. Even when we see there is some logic to it, there's a reason, there's sort of an explanation why they exploded the way they did. We see that the logic and the reason has no control over the emotion to limit it, to restrict it, to hold it back. That the midah would be somewhat in proportion to what I understand. Adarabah, the contrary, hamidas misgabres ala seichel. We see that the midas are so strong that they overpowered logic, and logic doesn't have any impact. And the intellect, the logic, the reason, it's like nobody home. Shebe'ez is serious hamidas. We see when the emotions of the Nefesh Bahamis explode. Ma'abed sichle, people lose their logic, they lose their intellect, they become irrational. It's as if they have no brains. People act like fools. They act like somebody who's totally insane. You can't reason, you can't talk, you can't explain, you can't negotiate. So that is because the midas they take over. So it's not only that the seichel doesn't control the midah, but the midah totally cancels out the logic and the seichel. So this is the key difference between a human and an animal, and this is the key difference between the nefesh elokis, the midas of the nefesh elokis, and the midas of the nefesh bahamis. That the emotions of the nefesh elokis are sort of created by logic, and therefore they're led by the logic, by the reason. The animal soul's midas are not created by logic; they sort of have a life of their own. It's pure emotion. The reason that's there is just to sort of rationalize and excuse and give a license to do what they want to do. Another thing where we see how a person loses is logic and reason altogether. Very often people do things that are totally inappropriate, and normally the person would think, a person would think that other people will find out what he does. He'd be embarrassed. He would never do it. He's thinking, people will never know what I'm up to. With normal thought, thinking, that's not the way you should think. Because when you're into something, it leaks out. So the fact that he talks himself into it, and as we see, unfortunately, very often, every other day, there's something on the headlines about something someone did. At the time they did it, they were convinced that nobody would ever know what they did, something really ugly, something really embarrassing for them, embarrassing for their family. Why did they do it? Because they were convinced that there's no way in the world this will ever come out in the open. So this itself is a sign that the midah overpowers him so much that he can't think straight. He's not rational anymore. He loses logic and he loses reason. And that's because the emotion is so strong, it cancels out the logical process. There is no logical process. Motion takes over. And that's why we see people will do such foolish things, such insane things. They have a temptation for something, they have an impulse for something, they have a lust, and they will do things that are totally illogical, totally inappropriate. There's no way that you would say that their intellect is sort of dictates to them that this is the right thing to do. So why do they do it? Because he loses his seichel. The emotion is so strong that it overpowers the seichel. So this is the basic difference between the nefesh elokis and nefesh bahamis. This is the difference between a human being and an animal. This is the difference between tzaddikim and rishoyim. And where does all this come from? Because on a higher level, this is the difference between the world of Tahu and the world of Tikkun. Got it? Okay, I want to review this chapter before we go to the next. So first, let's do the terms that came up here. And that's here on page 20. Let me give you 2 minutes to try to figure it out yourself, and then we'll do it together. It's only six terms. On top of the page, I'm talking about where it says chapter 16. That's where we're up to.
That's your bed.
Okay, so let's go it over now. So number one, Hamayach Shalit Alalev. What does that phrase mean? That the Eibishter created us in a way that naturally the mind rules over the heart. Number two, Anfem Ispardin.
Yeah, I know it, the connotations, the branches separate, but what's.
What is the connotation, right?
I guess it's the same, like it's a disease, like people that have intellect, like, I don't know. Actually, I forget. I don't know.
Anybody? It's a term that's used in the Zohar to describe the midas in the world of Tahu. And in that world, the midas were like separate branches. Just like in a tree, that the branches separate one from the other. The trunk, everything is one. And then when the branches start growing, they become separate from one another. The midas are separate from one another. So let me just skip to number 4, because that's connected. What does hiskalulus mean? Inclusion. So what does that mean? What's the inclusion there?
Integration, right?
Of what?
Of different midas.
Right. So in this context, it means the opposite of number 2. The inclusion that one midah includes the other. Chesed has gebura in it, and so on. Then we have 3 and 5. 3 is ribi oir, and 5 is miyat oir. What is that referring to? So the truth is, it's a Hasidic term, but it's really Hebrew. Ribi is Hebrew, and miyat is Hebrew, oir is Hebrew. So again, it's referring to the world of Tahu, that in the world of Tahu, the light was at a proportion stronger than the vessel, than the Calym. And that caused the Shvirus HaKalym. Right. And normally the light and the vessel, the light and whatever it is that contains it have to be in proportion to each other. And therefore, if it's a stronger light, then the Calym has to be much bigger. Or if it's a smaller Calym, then the light has to be much smaller. In the world of Tahu, it was a lot of light, a very intense light, and the Calym couldn't contain it. In the world of Tikkun, which is the world that wasn't broken, the world of Tikkun, which means that things are upright, in that world, the light was less, and therefore it was contained, and things are in a structured way. What is Shema? Shema? It's one of the names of Hashem. I told you I would bring you the chart, and I forgot to bring it up, so I'll try to remember for tomorrow. If not, I'll try to remember for Tuesday. If not, I'll try to remember for Wednesday. We'll get it here eventually. Shema, we said that Hashem's name, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, everyone knows the gematria of that name is 26. But there's another way of making the gematria, and that's by spelling out each letter, which means you spell out the letter Yud, Yud, Vav, Dalet, and you write out fully the word letter Hey, and you spell it out, Hey, Aleph, and the same with the Vav. When you spell it out all the way, there are 4 different ways you can spell it. If you spell it one way, the gematria will be 45. If you spell it another way, the gematria will be 52. If you spell it a third way, the gematria will be 63. And if you spell it a 4th way, the gematria will be 72. So Shema is one of the ways of spelling Hashem's name, and that is with alephs. In other words, Hashem, letter Hey is spelled Hey Aleph. And the Vav is spelled Vav, Aleph, Vav. And the last Hey is spelled Hey Aleph. And then it'll add up to 45. There are other ways of spelling it with a Yud, you can spell it with a Hey, and those other ways will have other gematrias. So that's Shema. In this Maimer, he also explains that Shema also refers to the sphere of Chokhmah, wisdom. And what he explained was that in the world of Tahu, Shema was not revealed, which means the Chokhmah, again, we're talking about worlds now, spheres, a very high spiritual realm, but everything that's down here is a reflection of what goes on up there. That the attribute of Chokhmah, Hashem's wisdom, wasn't shining on the Midos, and as a result of that, it broke. So we'll go now to the questions, so we'll discuss a little bit more. So on page 24, you have questions. It's all connected to this. Take another 2 minutes and write the answer to the question, then we'll do this together. What do you hear in the background?
Calym.
Okay, let's try to do this together now. So question number one, what are the 5 weapons? So Gis Maimer explains that davening is a time of war. It's war with our nefesh Bahamas. And just like in war, we use weapons, the same is with davening. And even though there are many weapons, but being that the Mishnah talks about 5 weapons, that's an indication of these 5 weapons. They include all the different categories that could be in weapons. So what are these 5 weapons? Begashmis, and then in the Maimer, we'll learn what are the 5 weapons Baruchnis. Sword, bow and arrow, shield, what? Allah. Allah means a club, a stick. And the 5th one is a spear. Each one functions in a different way, and we have the same thing, Baruchnis. Okay, what is it that characterizes a Calym? Kulei Lev, it's all heart. Number 3, what is the connection between the breaking of the Calym in the world of Tahu to the spheres being separate branches?
They don't have anything that they can like relate to the other one by, so that's
right. Being that they're separate, which means one sphere doesn't include the other, so chesed is pure, intense chesed, and gvura is pure, intense gvura. And as a result of that, they clash, and that's what caused the breaking of the vessels. In the world of tikkun, one includes the other. And as a result of that, they could connect to each other. But in the world of Tahu, each one is separate from the other. What is the connection? No, we did that. What is the connection of the above to the meichen being disconnected? In the world of Tahu, it says that the realm of intellect is not connected to the realm of the emotion. How is that connected to number 3?
it's the same idea, that they don't have any intellect in them, they don't believe it.
Right.
It's also called the flash.
So he explained that when motion is based on intellect, then it's limited and it gives room for another kind of emotion. When emotion is not based on intellect, then it's unlimited emotion. It's very strong, very intense, but primarily it's unlimited. It doesn't leave any room for any other kind of emotion than different what it is. Seichel, when it's based on intellect, the emotion is coming from based on a reason, based on logic, and therefore it has a certain sort of measurement, has a certain limit to if a person loves something because of this and this, it's worth it, it's very valuable. So the love will be in proportion to how valuable it is. And the same with any logical conclusion. If it's any emotional conclusion that's based on logic, it'll be limited by the way he understands it, the way he values it. So in the world of Tahu, the realm of Meichen didn't connect to the realm of emotion, and therefore the emotions were unlimited and one couldn't tolerate the other in whatever it means up there in the spiritual realm. Number 5. Well, often the Nefesh Bahamas has good reason for its emotional outburst. Is it still considered midas of a behemoth? Why? So in other words, what it means is it looks like the reason is the cause. Really, the reason was just a trigger. The real cause is pure emotion. Sometimes, it doesn't say this in the Mimer here, but in other places he says, sometimes the person gives a reason, and then you find a way of, oh, I can explain that this reason is not a valid reason to be upset. Before you turn around, there's another reason. You have to try to make the person, pacify them and explain them that reason also is not a real reason. Then they get a third reason, which means it's really not the reason. It's coming because it's just pure emotion. The reason is just an excuse. You take away this excuse, they have a different excuse. And I know the Rebbe once wrote that in a letter to someone about anti-Semitism. And he said, you see that sometimes the anti-Semites, they say they hate the Jews because they have all the money, and that's where all our money is. They have all the money, they're so rich, that's why we hate them. In other places, you find the reason why they hate the Jews is because they look down at them, they're so poor, and they live in the dumps, and they're not, they have no class, they're the lowest class in the community. So they hate them because we're poor, or they hate us because we're rich. And many other reasons that are given. The answer is, it's just, unfortunately, hate. And the reasons are just excuses to make it legitimate to give it a license. And the same is with our Nefesh Bahamas. So what would be the main point of chapter 16? These are the details. What's the main point? So the main point is that the seichel is supposed to be ruling over the heart. That's definitely no, it is the main point, what we're supposed to learn from there. But in the mimer, remember I told you, every mimer is made up of a few chapters. It's a chain. One chapter, it's leading into the next chapter. So the main point of this chapter is to help us understand the way the Nefesh Bahamas, remember this is a war against the Nefesh Bahamas. So in order to know what the right strategy is, we have to understand the enemy. So the main point of this matter is to explain how the Nefesh Bahamas functions, that it's pure emotion, not based on intellect, and then we'll understand why we need to use the club. That's what he's going to explain in the next chapter. In fact, we actually didn't do the kitzur, so we have 1 minute. Right, let's do the kitzur. So it's on page 5. That's the synopsis of the whole chapter. Yuvayer, in this chapter, he explains Maimer, the saying of our Chazal, HaKadosh Baruch Hu roides rishayim b'makel. Hashem beats the wicked people with a stick, with a club. V'vishnimshul the klovim. What's kelev? Kulei leiv. Hatzadikim, these are just points, it's like an outline. Hatzadikim libam b'shusam. The tzadikim, their heart is in their hands. Hamayach shalat alalev. The mind, the seichel, rules over the heart, which means not only it rules over the heart, it means that the midas, the emotions in the first place are al pi seichel. They come from and they're guided according to the intellect. Rishayim, the wicked people, is the other way around. Heim b'shus libam, their heart and their emotions controls them. Yuvayer, Sheirish, Ahefer. Then he explains the spiritual root for this difference. The difference between the Nefesh Elokis and Nefesh Bahamis is a result of the difference of the world of Tahu. Eretz Takifim, they were very forceful lights. V'amidus Anfam Ispard, and the Midas was separate branches, and that's why there was Shviras HaKelim. The Tikkun in the world of Tikkun, which is to correct what happened in the world of Tahu, the light of Meichin, that causes that the Midas give room for one another, and they can include one another, and then there's no Shvira. On the contrary, they can coexist and be together. The Yasber, and then he explains the Midas Nefesh Elokam, that this is, first he talks about Tzaddikim and Rishayim, then he talks about the world of Tahu and the world of Tikkun. And at the end, he brings it down to this is the difference in every person between my midas of my nefesh elokis and the midas of my nefesh bahamis. This is something which comes from seichel, and this is pure midas. Okay, we'll stop here to be continued in Mitzvah Hashem.
Thank you, Rabbi.